Well, thank you, Kate, for not only the invitation to present some of the work we've been doing for the past 10 years now in Ohio, but I think more importantly, on behalf of my colleagues, I want to thank you for continuing to take our calls. Because as you will see, what we have tried to do and how we have spent energy has really, in deference to Kate and her team, really stressed their team in ways in terms of feature sets and things that the system could do. And so what I want to do is try to tell our 10-year story in 10 minutes. And so if I need somebody to pull the hook and pull me off away from the podium, just give me the heads up of that. But basically what we have done in Ohio is use this tremendous stack. I know there's a mixture of clients in the audience, some new to this area. Others of us have been in it in a while. But what digital science and its portfolio of products have to offer is really powerful. And I wanted to tell the story about how we've applied that in the state of Ohio to really advance the knowledge economy. So something even bigger than some of the things that we're using at our institutions to manage workflow and reporting and all the things that we're learning about. Really, the challenge was posed about 10 years ago, looking at the innovation life cycle, right? So where do new ideas come from and how do they make their way into our lives? And so in the simplest definition, it really starts in many cases with the creations within our studios and laboratories in our universities, right? We have great people doing great things, thinking about the future. And some of those great things then lead to spin-outs, companies, licensed technologies that are ultimately translated onto the factory floor, which is our hope. And then we think about state government or government in general, and through policies and incentives, really government helps set the stage for even broader kinds of issues like workforce development, like creating incentives to bring companies to our region, and ultimately economic development. So if you think about this continuum, that's kind of the space that we were challenged to operate in. Now, for those of us who work in universities, we realize, or maybe we don't and should, what a tremendous environment we have the opportunity to work in, right? That is replete with resources. We have faculty experts, we have equipment and technologies that may just be 2 laboratories down the road. And so this is just part of our ecosystem on our universities. But if you are a manager at a small company, a startup company, or somebody that is in biotech or manufacturing, you may not have the access to resources to be able to do the next generation thing, to look at product innovations, whatever your product is, or you perhaps have an anomaly in your production facility, and how could you find the expert who might be able to diagnose the issue and help you sort of replicate that? And so that's kind of the milieu. That was really the prompt, that we can do all this great stuff, but how do we, because of our large and complex organizations, 10 years ago there was these conversations, and business leaders from small and medium-sized and even larger companies said, we would call upon universities, but you guys are very complex and difficult to navigate. You have so many doors of entry, and you have so many different websites. Is there a way that we could basically do sort of one-stop shopping to find the expertise, the resources that we need? So this has really set the stage for the project that has become known as the High Innovation Exchange. So the question is, what kind of sort of assets did we want to lift up as we sort of tackled this issue? Clearly our experts, Clearly, research services that we have, DNA sequencing labs, for example, 3D printing, those sorts of things, and then all of our licensable technologies. And could we put our arms around that? So that sort of predates our conversations with Kate Byrne, Jonathan Breeze, and others who are part of the Symplectic digital science family. And oh, by the way, could you do something for all of the universities across the state of Ohio? So could you try to come up with a strategy to put your arms around these assets and sort of lift up all of the schools? So in Ohio, we have 14 public universities, and we have several private universities, Case Western University of Dayton, that are research powerhouses. And so when we think about lifting this up, how do we go about that? So I'm a data guy, and it all started with, okay, data, where are we going to get this data? So now I'm going to fast forward through 4 or 5 years, and in 2018, we launched the Ohio Innovation Exchange. The technology behind it is the Symplectic's Elements and Discovery, a stack of technologies with hooks into dimensions for harvesting patents, et cetera. And so really, when we started out with this, it was really focused on 4 universities. So it was Ohio State, Ohio University, which is where I'm from, Case Western Reserve in the Cleveland area, and the University of Cincinnati. And so we really started with, how do we do this? And for us, it started with data, obviously. And so at the present, that number of universities has grown from 4 universities to now 10 plus. And so this is, when I put together this chart for another purpose, what's not reflected in here is all the challenges and the arduous road that it took to get here. When we had developed our approach way back in the day, we really focused on the data and what we could get from the institutions. And our ask of the data from the schools was pretty onerous. In fact, it was very off-putting because many schools said, we don't even know where that data is for our institution. And now you want us to give it to you. But I can tell you that working with Kate's team and Symplectic, that ask of our schools has gone down significantly because of their ability to mine publications and grants and allow us to build some pretty robust profiles with the data that they bring to the table in a much more automated way than we were capable of in 2015. And a snapshot today, 5 years later, is, like I said, we have 10 plus. There's a little bit of FOMO going on with some of the other universities in the state saying, wait a minute, why are we part of this? And that has kind of incented participation. But we see a steady traffic and visitors to our site that right now, actually my colleague Jeff Agnoli said that our current number of visitors to the site is about 15,000 unique visits a month. I know there was a talk earlier about, or a conversation earlier about native Google searches, and that's how many folks find themselves and find the resources. So they're doing a native Google search for somebody, and it ends up taking them to a profile and finding it this way. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit, and this is actually something related to this larger ecosystem. One of the advice as we headed down this path, there was a peer system that had significant traction in this space. And they said, you know, if you're going to head down this path, do not assume if you build it, they will come. You have to actively sort of engage an audience, especially because it really is a new audience who may not be familiar with this resource. And so through a series of activities and circumstances, alignment of the stars, we've been able to actually cultivate the broader ecosystem by making businesses and industries aware of what this is and its resource. And so my colleague also has been very active in using social media to really promote what we're doing and lifting up not only this site, because at the end of the day, it's simply a website, but if we think about it as an enabler of lifting up innovations across universities across the state. There is no centralized sort of way of doing that. Each university, we don't have a system in Ohio, so each university sort of tweet and promote and LinkedIn their own things. But this was an opportunity to sort of create and leverage that. Here's a great example. I have two examples of how we have really bolstered sort of the ecosystem. So you may have heard, it's been all over the news last year about this time, Intel announced its investment of $20 billion in Ohio to build 2 chip manufacturing plants outside of the Columbus area. And they're predicting 3,000 new jobs and 7,000 construction jobs, et cetera. So it's been seen as a real boon to the state's economy. And so one of the things that Intel did was they said, you know what, workforce development, making sure we have the next generation of workers ready is just as important as making the chips. And so Intel invested $50 million with matching funds from the NSF to really invest in education, semiconductor education and research. And one of the things they did in a first phase is they made available $17.7 million that it was a competitive process, but the universities in Ohio could apply for this and to help them grow their programs. So again, getting students ready. And so they awarded 8 awards, and that one of the requirements of this was that they had to be collaborative, multi-institutional in nature. And so it ended up being about 80 colleges, small and technical schools, community colleges, who were the benefactors of this investment of $17 million. So there was a lot of energy, right? The state's energy, a lot of focus on this. The universities were very keen on it. So we thought, well, how do we sort of insert ourselves into that and sort of help raise it? So we actually sponsored a webinar series in partnership with OhioX, which is a tech sort of membership organization in Ohio. And we approached Intel and we said, would you be willing to sort of come and showcase and talk about not only your investment in these projects, but we'll invite the projects themselves to come and talk about what they are going to be doing with the money that they garnered from this grant program. And to our surprise, Intel took our call and said, yeah, we'd be willing to do that. So we were simply the sponsor. We convened this, and so over a period of, I guess it was about 9 months, we hosted 5 of these virtual webinars in which, most interestingly, it attracted over 500 viewers from a wide variety of sectors. So again, it's not just academics. While there were academics in that audience, there were people in tech, there were people from the legal, financial, construction, all who were just kind of keen on what are the universities and Intel doing? Because I know it's going to impact me somehow. And so it was an opportunity to really hitch our wagon, if you will, to something else that is going on and to sort of demonstrate the potential value of having all of these. You know, I think I showed the slide. We have 10 or 11,000 faculty and resources that are profiled in OIX. And then one final example. The future is here, folks. This one kind of caught me by surprise. I don't know if you've seen about this. There's a company called Joby Aviation that's been sort of quietly working, they're out in California, quietly working on the next generation of what they call these electronic lift-off or take-off and landing vehicles. So think air taxis, right? We are all familiar with these drones, but they have been working quietly with the FAA, various branches of the military, the airline industry, and Uber. And they have recently secured all of the approvals to begin moving forward to building these vehicles that imagine that are autonomous. I'm not sure that I'm ready for that, but these are smart things that carry people. So imagine you have to get to the airport, and this then comes and picks you up and takes you to the airport. And so they have announced that they're building a manufacturing plant in Dayton, Ohio, which of course is the home of the Wright brothers and Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And they're going to begin to build these basically very sophisticated air taxis. And so the whole idea, again, another opportunity for economic investment in the state, jobs, and all of the sort of collateral that sort of follows that. Why is that germane to us? Well, it turns out there's a coalition of academics in Ohio who have expertise in advanced aviation systems. And both from Wright-Patterson, from NASA Glenn, which is up in Cleveland, Ohio, and then academics at many of our universities. And they were aware of what we were doing, again, as the word has built about the Ohio Innovation Exchange, and they said, could we be featured in this? Again, it's multi-institutional, and we said, of course. And so it became an opportunity, and this is in the early phases, but again, our ability to sort of create these groups and showcase them, and then it becomes a rallying point for people who want to find the expertise in this particular space. And so again, it was another opportunity to hitch our wagon to something that is more broadly going on. 2 more slides. This is just sort of I know this is very difficult to read, but this is ultimately how we sort of see the Ohio Innovation Exchange in supporting the broader ecosystem across multiple sectors. And what you can't see, because it didn't render out very well, is the spheres that are colored in, or organizations that we have touched, that we have interfaced with, and who are aware. So clearly university partners, state and regional groups, private sector, amplifying organizations, and even public sector and funding agencies. And I think my colleague and I, Jeff, we feel like we made it when the head of the research division of the state's economic development agency said, who we've been in contact with over the years, said, you know, OIX, the Ohio Innovation Exchange, has really kind of made it. And he said every time he has a chance, he talks about it as an early stage discovery tool. Yes, there is a whole lot of energy and resources and steps in drawing companies from California to Dayton, Ohio. But if you're beginning that exploratory process of moving your company or looking for the expertise, then this is, so we hope, a sort of a tool that is part of the ecosystem. And finally, I wanted to show this slide. This is just sort of, I thought, our lessons learned for doing a multi-institutional sort of collaborative. As you've heard today, and for those of you who've been in this space for a while, this can be arduous work. And thankfully, the great team at Symplectic is great to work with, and they have been very receptive to us. But it's been an arduous path. And I've been on this for 10 years as the project director. And there are some days where I say, you know what, drop the mic. I think I'm kind of done. It's time for somebody else. But there's some things we learned along the way. So one of it was a strategy we took early on is honor your partner's investment. When we headed down this path, there were a number of different systems in play at the universities that they were using to manage faculty resources and data. We didn't want to get into the business of trying to supplant them and say, you need to adopt this tool. At the end of the day, we just want your data. We then used and deployed Elements as the tool of choice. So we focused really on the data. Select appropriate technologies for the task at hand. And again, digital science delivered on that. Engage, engage, engage. This is a challenge for us that perhaps you guys at your schools may not, will be less of a challenge perhaps, is because we're multi-university. There is no provost or president that says, you shall. I'm going to get your promotion and tenure out of this system. So we've had to figure out how to incent participation. And that's a bit challenging because we lacked that stick, if you will. Sometimes a stick can be useful. In this case, we can't really do that. Build awareness. Again, don't assume you will be able to build it and they will come. And then finally, for us, hitching your wagon to other things that are going on. Like I said before, at the end of the day, it's a website, albeit a very rich, information-rich website, but it could be very powerful, and we're seeing that. And by approaching these groups and trying to hitch our wagon to them, I think has helped move us on. So with that, I thank you.
I'm Cindy Logston from the University of Louisville. I just want to say that we sent you a new president. I hope you're enjoying her. She came from us to you, but I really enjoyed your presentation. Thank you so much. But one thing I'm not as clear on as I want to be, and that's how specifically you used Elements to accomplish your goal for building your website and so on. If you could just give me a little bit more about that. I'm sorry, I'm
Sure.
just not as clear as I want to be.
Sure. So what, as I alluded to, the ask of our institutions is basically we ask our schools for a roster of their faculty, home departments, contact information, et cetera. And then that is pushed in to the Elements platform and builds the profiles out. Now, one of the challenges curation. So there's only so much that raw data that we get from the schools does for us. And so we've had to sort of figure out how to handle the curation process. And what that means is adding the photo, adding the bio sketch, adding links to social media, all of these things that make the profiles really rich. And early on, we actually just curated them ourselves. We'd hire students, and we would begin this process for our schools. But that's how we used Elements is the behind-the-door system where the data is managed, and then it is published in Discovery, which is what you see here. Does that help? Yeah.
Hi, I'm Casey Marks from Purdue University. I think all this sounds really fantastic. Having the network of universities and industry and government and everything. You gave a lot of examples from high-tech industry, manufacturing, and connecting them with faculties of engineering and computer science, and I think that makes a lot of sense. I was wondering if this network has gotten much traction or use cases with health sciences, things like nutrition science, speech language pathology on the one hand, and then on the other hand, social science research like psychology or development and family studies are some examples. Have you gotten much traction on those? Is it relevant to those things?
Great question. So one of the things that came down from the Ohio Department of Higher Education is they recognized we couldn't boil the ocean. You know, for Ohio State, who is a partner in this effort, they have every department you can imagine, from art history to zoology and everything in between. So we were purposeful in focusing in on the STEM disciplines. But at the end of the day, if universities sent us their faculty roster for the College of Business because of what they were doing, they were included. So because, you know, we've had to accommodate and meet the schools kind of where they are and their ability to give us the data. So we do have health sciences represented in the exchange, and less so for the social sciences and such. So it's specifically sort of focused on this STEM. And I should also say, we are not building comprehensive CVs, right? So many of you who are using these technologies for promotion and tenure, where you have to get almost every little detail, we had the luxury of not worrying about that, because we were simply looking for representative output that speaks to your expertise. So that you may have faculty who have 250 applications, but maybe 40 is enough to be able to find this expert in the system. And so that gave us a little bit of room too, that I think is also challenging when you're using it for other internal university business. So.
Thank you, Tim. And I know in talking to Jeff that there's a tremendous amount of work that went into building it, but also maintaining it. For other organizations like Ohio Innovation Exchange, Innovate Pittsburgh is one that comes to mind. Are there ways to set like milestones, like early on before you got the attention of Intel and some of the other big companies? Are there milestones that you were looking at getting to kind of progress the platform and have a go, no-go point? Just kind of looking for guidance and advice to give other economic centers that want to leverage the power of universities, but also look at what's a longer-term roadmap, what should we expect?
I think incremental growth and awareness, great question, incremental growth and awareness. It would be great to say Intel is coming to Ohio because of the Ohio Innovation Exchange. That's not the case, clearly. But those kinds of strategic wins, it's really satisfying sort of the politicians, because this has been completely subsidized by the state government. So it's really been all volunteer army from our universities who've lent expertise and time, whether they're in libraries or IT or the research divisions of their institutions. The state has been all in with the funding of this incrementally over the years. And so it's just sort of showing incremental growth and impact, and it really has depended on the audience. Some people like web statistics, number of visitors. Others have said, wow, the Intel thing that's a big thing. So it's trying to look for strategic wins where we can find them. And our biggest challenge is getting the universities to sort of see the value. If I'm being perfectly candid, those in the industry see it because all of a sudden they have access to this information. Politicians are very keen on it. And I think also it's an opportunity. You know, higher education is facing some significant headwinds these days, right? What the relevance of what we do? And this is an opportunity, I think, to sort of showcase what we're doing as part of the whole economic sort of ecosystem. So I don't want to take from, I'll be around if anybody has any questions, but I don't want to take from the next speaker. So thank you very much.